At Douglas, we are serious about the future. We study everything, push through the hard questions, and strive to understand each other's perspective. We believe that every good future must include well-educated students with the confidence to speak up and the curiosity to listen. These conversations allow us to continue innovating feminist space for generations of students. In this episode of Douglas Perspectives, we sit down with Dr. Rebecca Mark, Director of the Institute for Women's Leadership, to discuss feminist leadership and education. So I'm so thrilled to be here. My name is Meghan Rehbein. I'm the Dean of Douglas Residential College, and I'm here with my good friend Rebecca Mark. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Rebecca, and the work that you're doing at IWL.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you, and I am the director of the Institute for Women's Leadership Consortium, and I'm also a professor in women, gender, and sexuality studies. And I've been here at Rutgers for 3.5 years now, which is exciting to have be able to say. I came right near COVID. I came from Tulane University, where I had been the founding director of the Newcomb College Institute for Women. So I was delighted to be able to go from one position to the other. I did a lot of work founding the Center for Academic Equity, so I'm fascinated by undergraduate education and how we can help the next generation of students.
What got you started in women's gender and sexuality studies? What was the thing in your academic career that kind of pointed you in that direction?
Well, I do remember being a young scholar at SUNY Purchase. So I'm an East Coaster. I've come home. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And I went to SUNY Purchase when it was just brand new. Mm-hmm. And we read A Transcendental Etude by Audrey and Rich. And I was reading it late at night, having procrastinated. And I ended up like looking up and then running to get my friend and saying, "Oh my goodness, I think I'm a feminist." So it was an actual moment. Mm-hmm. But I had a grandmother who had gone to Bryn Mawr. I had women who were very powerful on both sides of my family. So I always knew that this was something. And as a young girl, I always was like, why do the guys get $5 for cutting the grass and I get 25 cents an hour for babysitting? So I was ready to go.
Wage equity even then.
Wage equity from the start.
I had a similar experience my first year in college. I took a class with Susan Douglas.
Oh my goodness.
Amazing class. And she had just published Where the Girls Are. And I was sitting in class talking with her and thinking, I've been feeling this for so long, and I never had the words to talk about it. And now I have the words.
And from that moment on, I was a feminist literary critic.
What are the things that go into making a feminist space at a university? What makes it feminist, and why is it important?
I think that's changing all the time. And I think that in the positions we're in, we have to really be listening to the students and to ask them. And it's not your feminism of the 70s or 80s or 90s or even the first part of the 20th century. There's a 21st century feminism that I find absolutely exciting. I think the younger generation, particularly the trans students, the LGBTQ students, the students who are looking at gender as fluid, I think that's a challenge that we have not yet gone as far as we can with. I think and the students are just leaders, and I love that. And I love listening and learning. Every class I'm teaching now, I'm listening and learning. And what makes it feminist is that we put the advocacy for gender equity, the advocacy for gender fluidity first and foremost. And we do research that actually moves us further along in understanding that. So as a professor in women, gender, and sexuality studies here, I have that opportunity to teach those classes and learn about what's next. I think it must be global. We must see that if there are women in different parts of the world who are experiencing types of violence in conflict zones, in climate catastrophe zones where they've been displaced. I read the other day that 80% of the displaced people in climate, from climate change, are women and children.
Yeah.
So we are now facing where we have to open our eyes and we have to constantly say, how can we make this conversation broader? How can we actually open our arms to what this means? We know what to do as feminists. We've had now 50 years of feminist studies classes throughout the country. 1970, Douglas was one of the first, and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies together with Mary Hartman as the dean to start Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, and Rutgers should be so proud of its feminist spaces. We are known internationally as the IWL consortium, as you know, has now 8 centers dedicated to research on gender.
One of which is Douglas, and we're so proud to be part
Absolutely.
of the IWL.
And so we're always moving, always changing, but it is a very strong. We meet all the time, we collaborate on grants, and we've been collaborating on all kinds of programs.
No, I think, we did the Laurie Chair together, which the Laurie Chair has been around since the 80s. I think 1986
That's
when
right.
the Laurie Foundation established the chair. But this year's symposium was really something special on reproductive and health justice.
Reproductive health justice. That was quite something where we were able, in Douglas space, to Catherine Ludwig Center,
The Ludwig Center,
to bring together major speakers in the field of, in reaction to Dobbs, So we have taken, you and I working together, have taken what was a chair where one person would come to campus, and now we're working on different models of that, but we have a Laurie Chair speaker, and we had this symposium, and what excited me most was that room was full.
Of faculty, of students, of community members, of alumni. It was full with such a varied community.
Which is what we always want at Rutgers, but with our geographical, it's a big campus. It's hard for the colleges to get together, for the schools to get together. Totally interdisciplinary, and 100 people at least in the room all day.
And real action as a result. So the students who were there, part of the Douglas Governing Council's goal last year was to advocate and get a Plan B contraceptive vending machine on campus.
That's right.
And as a result of some of the work and some of the advocacy they did as part of that symposium, they got it approved.
Oh, that's wonderful.
When the students are here in September, they will be the students will be moving forward with that project, working with IPNO and with the Office of General Counsel and with Douglas to get that Plan B vending machine. I want to make sure we talk a little bit about the Leadership Scholar Certificate too, because I think as a program, because the IWL, you're right, it's not just a consortium. You also
we run
very student-facing programs, one of which is this Leadership Scholar Certificate. So we're thrilled that Douglas can be part of that program with you, but talk a little bit about it, because I don't know that everybody knows about it.
Well, the Leadership Scholar Certificate program, I had a wonderful moment yesterday because I went to see Barbie, and then I turned around, there were 3 students, and they asked me about the Leadership Scholar Certificate
Really?
program.
Oh, great.
And it's one of the programs where I think Douglas and IWL work most targeted in a very powerful way. And that is that we take in 20 students a year, 19 credit, 2-year, very hands-on, one-on-one program in Leadership Scholar Certificate. So the students come in, they take a course now with me, they used to take it with Dr. Bunch, and they study women's leadership in all areas, in politics, in education, in public health, global women's leadership. And they then do a social action project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for you and I, that social action project, they have done social action projects in the community. They define a problem that they'd like to propose an answer for. They do an immense amount of research. They put together a proposal, they get the proposal approved, and then they actually put their project into practice.
We talk all the time about the impact our programs have on students. We see the difference. For Douglas students, they come in their first semester of their first year, hesitant, not sure, should they speak up, should they not speak up, and by the time they graduate, we can't stop them from speaking up. Tell me a little bit about the impact that you see on students when they go through IWL program.
In the program, they have more space and time to focus on feminist theory, feminist practice, activist practice to create gender equity. And as they start doing that, they do gain a voice. And I talked about speaking up before, but they gain a voice, they gain a sense of themselves as part of a community. And this is really important. They don't see leadership as individual.
Yeah.
They see leadership as something you do with other people. Right. And I see Douglas students doing that all the time. They'll say, we were doing this, and I love that. And they begin to know, these are my assets. This is my community. My mother, my grandmother, who was first generation American immigrant experience, she is my leadership role model.
Yeah.
And they begin to know that they are going to get information outside of the books.
That leadership identity development, actually the theory of leadership identity development, which came out of studies of college students, is
That's
really
right.
about that. First they see others doing
That's right.
leadership, then they identify something in themselves that they think could also be
That's right.
about leadership, and then they practice, and then they figure out how to do it in community. And that figuring out how to do it in community is really what's so special about Douglas and the IWL, and so many of the programs at Rutgers that focus on this population of students who may not have had this experience before they got here.
Definitely. And they begin to think, what my life experience was will make me a better leader. So this experiential part starts to play a much greater role than they think, oh, I know how to do this. My family knows how to do this. I came in yesterday, one of the joys of being the director, and there's an alumni sitting there. And she looked at me and she said, I'm doing all of these great things with my life. But she said, it all started here.
Yes.
And she literally pointed to the table where they sat. And so it's been,
We hear that about so many of the experiences that students have at Douglas, that, when they're in Knowledge and Power, or when they're in the Global Village, or when they're in a Leadership Scholar Certificate, that there's something about the way we approach the theory, the way we approach social action, the way we approach the subject of gender, that is transformational for them in a way they've never had before. And so that goes back to your experience reading Adrienne Rich, my experience with Susan Douglas, that there is something about this work, this feminist work, that changes your perspective, that really focuses students.
And it focuses them for life.